Mr. De Leon has item 4, SB 318.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a very simple, straightforward bill. It's a parity bill that would allow SB 318 to allow rank and file members of CHP as well as CHP cadets to have appeal rights before the State Personnel Board during their probationary period. Currently, all state employees except rank and file members of CHP as well as CHP cadets can request that the State Personnel Board investigate the reason for their determination. These appeal rights protect employees from unlawful termination, especially during the probationary period, and should be provided to all state employees. This is a measure that is sponsored by the California Association of the Highway Patrolmen, and here in support also as well as to testify for this measure is Mr. Aaron Reed. Madam Chair, as well as members, I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Mr. Reed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, Aaron Reed representing the California Association of Highway Patrolmen. This really practically only applies to our cadets who graduate from perhaps one of the most rigorous training academies in the world. They have 6 months of their lives dedicated to training. They leave the academy, they go out, and they're still in a 1-year probationary period. They've invested a lot in their job, and this allows them a chance to have an appeal if they're rejected in probation. All of the other employees in the department, including when an officer promotes to sergeant or a sergeant's promote to lieutenant, any of them can appeal, even though they serve a probationary period in those higher ranks as they go up. This is simply for those cadets, and then officers, they become officers for 1 year. They're still on probation. Every other unit has that right. Now, we're the only one. It happened in the Pete Wilson administration. In order to get a contract under that administration, we had to agree to that provision. We were the only ones that ended up getting a contract, so they're the only ones that had it. All these years, it's been in place for 13 years. We never knew it. We frankly forgot to go back and deal with it because we never have an issue. I think there's been 1 or 2 cases in 15 years. That's how few there are. They usually wash them out in the academy. The academy is so rigorous. They usually use that as a place where they're really going to, separate the wheat from the chaff.
Okay.
Thank you.
Questions? I have just a small question. Does this kind of tie the administration's hands, though?
No, not at all, because the burden of proof during probation is on the employee. It's a stronger burden. Any other appeal, the burden of proof is on the employer to prove wrongdoing. But in this case, in a probationary situation, the burden of proof rests with the employee. So they must prove, for example, discrimination of some sort in order to be successful.
Just a moment. Would you call the roll? I think we have a quorum. Boy, those are far.
Negrete-McLeod?
Here.
Negrete-McLeod here. Walters? Gaines? Padilla? Here. Padilla here. Vargas? Here. Vargas here.
Okay, quorum is established. Good, I'm sorry.
That's
it. Okay. Any questions from any of the members? Do I have a motion? Oh, I have 2 motions. Yes and yes. The motion. Call for the roll, please.
Negrete-McLeod?
Aye.
Negrete-McLeod, aye. Walters? Gaines? Padilla?
Aye.
Padilla, aye. Vargas?
Aye.
Vargas, aye.
Thank you.
You have 3 votes to make
Yeah.
it out.
Yeah. Yeah. You have 3 votes, enough to get it out, but we're going to put it on call for our 2 members.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members. Thank you.
Our next presenter is Mr. Simidian, who signed in earlier. Mr. Simidian has item 1 on the agenda, SB 27.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. If this measure looks familiar to some of you, it's because it is the measure that, substantially the same measure that passed out of both houses of the legislature last year, not only on a bipartisan basis, but unanimously. And when I say unanimously, I mean a true unanimous vote without members staying off. The bill was an effort to deal with what I think of as the sort of low-hanging fruit in the debate around public employee pensions. And it arose out of a series of town hall meetings and sidewalk office hours that I held in the year 2009, where I have to tell you I heard more about public employee pensions than I had ever heard in 25 years of public service at 5 different levels. And I have to say, as I talked with my constituents, I was frankly impressed, because when I said, well, wait a minute here, typical state person, CalPERS, has 20-plus years in the system. They retire with maybe a $25,000 a year pension. Is that what's troubling you? No, that's not what we're troubled about. What we're troubled about, said folks, is these big numbers we read about in the newspaper stories. And I said, well, let's talk about that a little bit. And it turned out that the thing that really engaged the people I was talking to, my constituents, was the issue of pension spiking, which is the process that, I want to be very clear, is entirely legal. We have created a system that incentivizes it, and it encourages people to push as much income into their final compensation period as they possibly can to then inflate their retirement in perpetuity. And as I say, can't blame anybody for doing it. We've created a system that encourages it. I think very few of us would go home to our husbands or our wives or our partners and say, gee, I deliberately did not take advantage of every opportunity to maximize our retirement security in our later years, dear. That seems an unlikely way to go. And so it seemed to me the solution was to say, let's talk about a change in the system that will continue to provide a public employee pension based on final compensation, but that is real in terms of the final compensation, and that does not allow for these opportunities to artificially inflate. That is essentially what the bill does with respect to both CalPERS and CalSTRS. As many of you know, there are 37 Act counties and independent actors. They are not the subject of this bill. This is a CalPERS, CalSTRS bill. The other issue that came up was the folks who said, well, I don't understand why we're paying 2 or sometimes 3 paychecks for folks who left work on Friday and, quote, retired, but then came back to work on Monday. And, again, can't fault people for taking advantage of the system as it exists, but it is, frankly, both of these practices are doing no service to the taxpayer, who ultimately picks up the tab, does no service to most of the employees in the system, who frankly rely on the solvency in the system for their own well-being over the long haul, and third and finally, casts discredit on a whole system because of these particular opportunities to stretch in a way that I would characterize as overreaching in the context of a system. So the bill is designed to address the issue of revolving door double dipping. Doesn't say you can't come back. Quite the opposite. These are a talented group of people. They've got experience. They've got years of service. They've got expertise. You want to be able to access them. But it says have a 6-month delay before you come back so that it's real that you've retired. You haven't just left on Friday, come back on Monday. As I said, just 2 closing observations before I ask for your aye vote, Madam Chair and members. I had one of the counties I represent came to me and said, well, but Senator, you don't understand. Sometimes we bring these folks back because we're going to use them to train the person who replaces them. I said, well, if you planned ahead, you should be able to do that without doing that. He said, well, but we bring them back to train the replacement. I said, so you want me to go back and tell the folks in my town halls and my sidewalk office hours, actually we're paying 3 checks. We're paying the check for the retirement, we're paying the check to bring the person back, and we're paying the check for the person who's actually doing the job that the retiree used to do, and we're going to pay 3 times for the same job. Well, I wouldn't put it that way. Well, I wouldn't either, but that's what we're talking about. Final thing, as I said, is just to say thank you again. I think for all but Senator Vargas, this is not a new issue. Senator Padilla, Senator Grady McLeod, and Senator Walters all voted for the bill last year, both in committee and on the floor. Dave Cox sat right there. It was one of the final chances we had to work with Dave, and I appreciated his comments at the time. I would respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Okay. I have a question. Why did you not include the Act 37?
We had essentially a division of labor that was agreed to last year. Mm-hmm. The Assembly picked up the Act 37 counties, and the Senate picked up the CalPERS and CalSTRS. And the issue I didn't address earlier, Madam Chair, is, well, what happened to the bill? The answer is the bill got vetoed by the governor, who said in his veto, we like the Senate bill, the bill that you all voted for, but we have problems with the Assembly bill on the 37 Act counties.
And they were joined, right?
And they were joined or contingent. I can't remember which device was used. But so my thought this year was to say, all right, look, we have the ability to reintroduce without attaching or joining the bills on a standalone basis, a bill that got a unanimous vote in both houses of the legislature. Let's just, I know there's going to be a further debate. That's entirely appropriate on the issue of pension reform, but it seemed to me this was, as I said, the low-hanging fruit, and we ought to take what action we could, and we ought to do it sooner rather than later.
Okay. Is there anyone in support of the bill?
Lindsay Ross, representing State Controller John Chung, in support.
Neil Johnson, SEIU Local 1000. We are in support of this bill. Thank you.
Aaron Reed, representing the California Association of Highway Patrolmen and the retired public employees, in support.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in support? Is there any opposition to the bill?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, good afternoon. My name is John Lovell, and I'm here representing the California Police Chiefs Association. Our only issue with the bill is the 180-day provision, which does not relate to the issue of pension spiking at all. And here's our concerns. First of all, many times with police chiefs, at the time they retire, the agency has not picked a replacement by that time. The selection of a police chief takes some care, and the practice in law enforcement is for the retired chief to remain on as a retired annuitant, and understand, when you're a retired annuitant, you don't add to your pension benefits. Your pension benefits are set in stone the day you retire, and that's what you're getting. So you're working as a retired annuitant, and that provides an orderly transition to the next police chief. We also see this in specialty law enforcement areas. If you have someone who has a specialty in vice, or it's okay. If you have someone who has a specialty in vice, narcotics, has a specialty in certain types of surveillance, and they retire, again, you have an orderly transition. Now, here's the irony. With the 180-day provision that a person must be off work for 180 days before they can come back as a retired annuitant, it actually costs the local agency more. Why? Because post requirements provide that if you are a peace officer and you're off for 180 days or more, and then you come back as a retired annuitant, the agency is required to do all of the backgrounding all over again, as if you've just walked in the door. So, a couple of things. First of all, the 180-day provision does not impact the pension spiking issue at all, where we are in agreement with Senator Simitian. Secondly, this will hamper our ability to do our job in an orderly way. Third, it winds up, the 180-day provision winds up costing agencies more at a point where agencies have been hammered anyway in budgets. If this provision were not in the bill, the California Peace Officers Association would change their position from oppose and to support. Thank you.
Well, I buy your argument a little tiny bit. The only reason I don't is my husband served in the LAPD, and as a lieutenant, they have men under them that are as big as some police forces. And he retired as a lieutenant on vice unit, and when he retired, the next guy came in. There was no mentoring.
And LAPD is a unique example because they're so large. More than half of the police agencies in this state have fewer than 70 sworn officers. And so that isn't the pattern everywhere else. LAPD is unique. But for every LAPD, there are 15 Arroyo Grandes, 25 San Mateos. And that's where the rubber really does hit the road on this particular issue.
Well, I might have to disagree with you. As I said, most jobs, you can put monkeys in there and, they'll learn a job, so.
Well,
No, I'm not saying
I
that-
wouldn't equate officers with a specialty who have put it on the line for 20 years as monkeys. You and I just disagree on that.
Okay. Any questions from the gentleman? No, okay. Okay, we have a whole bunch of behind you. Hi, how are you?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Andrew Antwi here today on behalf of the California Faculty Association. Our concern is one that we shared with the author on AB 14 or SB 1425 last year, and it's one that we renew again on SB 27 this year. The California Faculty Association is opposed to this bill because of the 180-day waiting provision and how it applies and how it impair, we believe, our ability to negotiate our collective bargaining agreement. We are currently at the bargaining table with CSU management. There is a program in our contract called the Faculty Early Retirement Program, otherwise known as the FERP. It allows professors, if a campus president agrees, to come back after they notice their intent to retire and work part-time. This is something that we bargained for. It's been in our contract for just about 20 years. And the presence of this in SB 27 actually makes it a potential takeaway item by CSU management. We've been through extended negotiations. We actually thank the author for accepting an amendment that was added to 1425 last year that calls for a one-year delay. And that's helpful to get members of the university faculty to be aware of this and get ready for the change in this policy. But it doesn't really help from our perspective because in the academic year, you have to begin your work for a university campus at the beginning of the school year in January. And so, in effect, if depending on when you file your notice to take advantage of the FERP program, you may be out for an entire school year. And some of the campuses in the 23 campus system are on a semester basis, and some of the campuses are on a quarter basis. And so with that, we believe that it's just something that we can't deal with, and it's been difficult for us. It's one of the many issues, obviously. It's not the only issue that we're dealing with in collective bargaining, but we wouldn't like to have the presence of this provision in a bill be just kind of a tool or a piece of leverage that the CSU management could use against us in collective bargaining.
Okay. Did you have a response?
Certainly, Madam Chair. On this, and I can go back and cover the preceding witnesses' comments as well, because they both deal with this issue of the revolving door double dipping. Speaking to this issue, I think it should be very clear. The measure does not preclude the negotiation of a FERC agreement. It simply says if you're going to negotiate a FERC agreement, then you need to have a 6-month separation in service before you return to campus pursuant to a FERC agreement. That's what the measure says. So it's entirely subject to continued negotiation. Any negotiation that takes place, subjects that are bargained at the table, are always subject to the larger parameters of state law. And what we're saying in this case is we don't want to see this kind of revolving door using what is thought of as a retirement process. As I said, anyone can continue to come back, use the FERC program, they can negotiate that, but it would have to be pursuant to just the 6-month separation. For most folks, not all, but most who finish up at the end of an academic year, it may mean that they simply have a quarter because they'll have a summer and then a quarter before they have to come back. And as I appreciate the acknowledgement. We not only gave a 1-year extension last year, which is, of course, now turned into 2 years because there's another 1-year extension on this provision in this bill, taking it all the way out to January 1st, 2013. With respect to the issues that were raised by the previous speaker, I want to be very clear. Perhaps I was misunderstood or wasn't clear enough. I wasn't suggesting that this provision goes to the issue of pension spiking. I was suggesting that this issue goes to the issue of, quote, revolving door double dipping, and that when folks do this, whether it's in one form or another, there are 2 paychecks being paid for the same person. And again, I'm okay with that after 6 months. Again, I say, hey, we're talking about people who have years of experience and expertise, but let's find somebody who hasn't just, quote, retired on Friday to use to fill that venue Orderly transition, large department or small. There's an assistant chief or a deputy chief or a captain or a lieutenant. Let one of those folks step up rather than effectively creating a system in which we have encouraged people to give their notice at the last possible opportunity so that they then step in and not only collect their check for retirement as they continue to work in place, but take their second check for doing the new job, which is the same job. So I think an orderly transition, can be and still will be there. And while there are a lot of the departments that are smaller in number, where this will probably be a bit more challenging, while it may be accurate to say that half of them, it's important to remember that's not half the officers, it's half the departments who represent a relatively smaller number of individuals and smaller populations. So for all of those reasons, I would suggest that the concern is overstated, and I will note that, as you heard earlier, we have support from the California Association of Highway Patrolmen who somehow think that this can continue to work in their law enforcement arena as well.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Next. And I just want to be clear that I didn't want to refer to any officer as a monkey. What I meant to say was that, and I used the word, but most departments, whether they're big or small, usually have somebody in that unit that has been working with whatever unit it is, whether it's vice, whether it's something else. And if those people are going to be moved up, they usually have had the training. They're well trained to move into the next phase of their career.
Madam Chair, if I can just add one follow-up point. As a matter of practice, members of the CSU faculty that are part of CFA already have to wait out 90 days, before they can exercise the FERT program. In addition, the presence of this provision in the bill has actually taken an item that CSU management usually likes and made it into a takeaway item. It's the fact that it's in the bill that makes it leverage at the bargaining table in the negotiations. It's something that normally they like because of the flexibility in order to deal with the need for professors to have experience in subjects as obscure as, who knows, French literature or Russian literature or whatever the topic may be. We are less able to bargain this issue, something that normally is not a takeaway because of the presence of this provision in SB 27.
Madam Chair, again, 1 minute we hear it's a takeaway, the next minute we hear it's something that management likes. I'm not sure how you can have that one both ways. We've already heard that they have to wait 90 days. I'm saying 180 days, which is, a lot of folks said, well, you should have to be gone for a year if you're going to call yourself retired. I said, no, I think that's excessive. And the notion that there aren't people there, we're in the worst economy in my lifetime, and we've been seeing, unfortunately, public sector universities shedding employees over the last 10 years. If ever there was a time when we ought to be able to make a smooth transition and draw on a deep well of folks who have, we're not talking about saying no, we're saying let's wait 6 months. Everybody who's been retired for 6 months to 60 years can be pulled back into the program. So there's quite a talent pool out there. The question is, are we going to use them, or are we really going to say, leave on Friday, come back on Monday, or leave on Friday, come back on Monday 90 days later?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Senators. Julianne Briles here on behalf of the California Association of Joint Powers Authorities, which is an association of risk managers who manage pools of insurance for general liability, workers' comp, health care, and other property and liability issues for cities, counties, and school districts and other special districts. Pool managers, and again, we're having to take the same opposed position to SB 27 for the same reasons that two of the prior speakers mentioned, which is the 180-day issue before being able to come back to work. Pool managers definitely are very talented, very rare hires for our JPAs. JPAs will advertise for a year or more to find somebody to take these jobs because they're very particular. You have to have actuarial experience, and as a pool man, in most of these pools, there really are only usually 2 or 3 people who work for them. That's clerical, and the pool manager really are the hires for those particular pools. So there isn't somebody to promote up into those positions. There is gleeful, almost poaching of employees sometimes, trying to get that experience base in to hold costs down for the taxpayer overall. So we do, unfortunately, have to take an opposed position on the bill as it is today, but would like to work with the author to see if there's any other way to deal with this. But there are many reasons why JPA will go out and hire and try to hire for a very long time before we can find somebody to take that position. With the bill written as it is today, we would not be able to do so.
Respectfully, you could hire anybody except the person who was retiring. Anybody who, anywhere in the state of California, out of the 38 million folks who are there, you can hire anybody except that one person, and that person you can hire anytime after 6 months.
Madam Chair, members, Paul Smith with the Regional Council of Rural Counties, representing the Boards of Supervisors of 30 rural counties, also on behalf of the California State Association of Counties. No surprise, we are, like the others that have spoken in opposition, we are opposed to the bill only with the provision of the 180-day sit-out portion. A couple of things to remind the committee. One, CalPERS already has restrictions and limitations for this population. I think you're going to probably be hearing bills later this year dealing with that. This is not a carte blanche thing that just happens with anybody at any time for extended periods of time. Furthermore, a lot of our county members have their own county restrictions on the time limits and conditions to coming back. And I think for the rural counties, this is especially troubling because we do have people that we have personnel we have to have and provide that are certificated and are specialty. You just don't find them easily, particularly in places like Modoc County or Sierra County. It's very hard to recruit for those, so you need the flexibility. I'll just leave you with one last point. This legislature and perhaps the voters are about to verge on a major realignment and restructuring of services. Counties are going to need maximum flexibility in that realignment with their personnel needs, as we're going to have to hire and manage and supervise a large number of personnel. Having this type of restriction just makes that job even harder. So we ask that this provision be dealt with in other manners. One we might want to look at is those areas where you do retire on Friday and come back on Monday, but you retired on Friday with a nice golden handshake. Those are the things I think we really need to focus on, not just a blanket 100-day sit-out. So we remain opposed with that provision in the bill.
Madam Chair, members, Dave Walrath, representing Small School Districts Association. We concur with the goals that the author is trying to reach: control pension spiking, avoid revolving door, other pieces. We have concerns on not the why of the bill, but some of the technical hows of the bill, particularly on whether there's potential of a plan change, whether there's an issue related to how different members of a plan are treated by position rather than service length or other types of concerns. And finally, in small rural districts, there is not always a person available to substitute. And so our concern is not the revolving door of retire on Friday, come back on Monday. It is you retire on Friday, all of a sudden the person who replaced you is sick and you need a highly qualified teacher in the classroom. And there's only one available. How to deal with that particular issue: short, part-time, limited term ability to come back in to meet the highly qualified teacher requirements. We have had discussions with the Senator's staff. We are working on proposing amendments that will address these issues, which we think will meet the Senator's goals as well as address our concerns. However, until that time, we are still in opposition.
Salvia Senor with the Association of California School Administrators. As mentioned previously, these are difficult times for school districts, in particular in small rural areas, and the issue of substitutes is a difficulty to address. We have had conversations with the staff of both the Senator and the committee, and thinking that maybe we can find some way of addressing that particular challenge. The other challenge for us as school administrators is the fact that many superintendents and administrators at the site level entered into those positions under the rules and regulations that existed at the time. And so as they have progressed through their careers, they believe that they've earned this vested right in the particular pension program that they contributed to. And so the difficulty for us as an association is to support anything that's going to change that as they enter their late years in career or preparing for retirement. So making this bill prospective in nature would relieve a tremendous amount of that pressure so that next generation of administrators or educators, when they're entering the profession, know exactly what the rules are or what the benefits will be for them at their future date of retirement. But we do appreciate the senator's willingness to sit and talk with us, but until we can address those issues, we're also in opposition.
Okay. Anyone else in opposition? Any questions from the members?
I just like the line about on a subject as obscure as French literature. You know, I was trying to figure out who are these great French literary figures, but so anyway, that threw me for a twist there.
I thought the argument had a certain je ne sais quoi.
Yeah, there you go. But no, I support this bill. I wasn't here last year, as was mentioned by the senator, but it is an issue that has come up. It seems like you're trying to find a middle ground. Frankly, I support public pensions strongly. I think that they're a very good thing. A defined benefit, I think, is something that a lot of corporations have gone away from. Interestingly, not all of them. I just left a Fortune 90 company that still has pensions, and it's a great way to keep employees. It's something that some large corporations still have, and so again, I support it. I think that what you're attempting to do here is reasonable, and I would move the item.
Did you, Mr. Samedi, your bill has been moved, but do you wish to elaborate on any of the opposition?
I think most of what you heard deals with this issue of the revolving door double dipping. I've spoken to that 2 or 3 times. I don't want to overstay my welcome. The arguments you heard subsequently were similar to the arguments that I think I had an opportunity to rebut, unless there are questions. I will just say, on a personal level, I'm the son of 2 public employees, and I made the case at the outset of the hearing that I think the public employee pensions that certainly most folks in CalPERS receive are relatively modest after relatively long tenure in public service. Different folks will agree or disagree about that. Fair enough. But I did think, as I said, we ought to step up where we could find common ground. This is estimated by some to be sort of a $100 million a year issue. And I think it's fair to the taxpayers. I think it's fair to the employees who rely on the solvency system. And I think it's important an important step for us to take if folks are going to have confidence in our public employee system statewide. The only comment I'll make about the revolving door issue one more time is, what's interesting as you listen to folks, and I heard this last year as I worked on the bill, and there's nothing wrong with this, it's just the way human nature is. People have come to expect that this is a right. People have come to expect that they get to retire and draw 2 paychecks for the first 6 months after they leave. And that's part of why it is such a jarring measure, is because, and so what you're hearing from folks is, gee, it's administratively inconvenient for us if we can't do it that way, and we'd like to just be able to disregard the fact that we're going to pay 2 or even 3 paychecks. Well, yeah, I get that, but for all the reasons I've described, I think that's an inconvenience that folks are going to have to learn to live with, and I think can learn to live with once we understand that there's a new way of doing business. I would respectfully ask for an aye vote. My thanks to the committee for its patience today and to the staff with whom we worked this year and last year. And I will continue to keep having these conversations on this core issue about revolving door double dipping. I don't think there is a middle ground, but on some of these technical issues, it's certainly important to keep the conversation going. Appreciate your patience.
The bill has been moved. Call for the roll, please.
Negrete McLeod?
Aye.
Negrete McLeod, aye. Walters?
Aye.
Walters, aye. Gaines?
Aye.
Gaines, aye. Padilla?
Aye.
Padilla, aye. Vargas?
Aye.
Vargas, aye.
Thank you, Mr. Samedi. And it has 5. It's out of committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members.
Also, I'd like to thank you because I don't know, I think everybody recognizes that in the world outside, pensions are one of the things that people are looking at, and I think they want us to fix them here. So thank you.
Thank you again.
Okay. Mr. Hernandez? What happened to Mr. Liu? Okay. Oh, maybe it was De Leon. I look like you. Okay. Mr. Hernandez has SB 270.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here in front of you. I'm presenting SB 270, which is my continuous appropriation bill. As you may recall, or if you don't know, that I've run this bill 3 other times, and unfortunately, it's never seemed to have made it through the legislature. But I'm hoping the 4th time is the charm. But also, as you may know, in previous budget cycles, we unfortunately have not been able to pass a budget on time. And I'm hoping that in this case, this year, that's not the case. But in the event that budgets aren't passed on time, I think it's not fair that our state employees not get paid. So that's why I've brought this, and I'm so passionate about this continuous appropriation bill, because these are individuals who've done work for the state, and they shouldn't be penalized for, doing their work. And then also, if in the event that they do, then they're going to be suffering quite a bit, especially making their mortgage payments, their car payments, etc. And also, as you may recall, in July of 2008, the former governor of the state of California tried to get such that in the event that a budget wasn't passed on time, that the state employees would get minimum wage. And of course, that also would add to the heartache, as well as the difficulty for individuals to be able to make ends meet. So the other thing that's interesting is there's currently 381 state funds that are continuously appropriated right now, and it's both reasonable and appropriate to add state workers to this list. And I'm just astounded that we have not already done so. But I have with me the bill sponsors, the California Engineers of California Government, and the California Association of Professional Sciences are here to testify on their behalf as well, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members, Pat Moran with Aaron Reed and Associates, representing the professional engineers in California government and the California Association of Professional Scientists. It's a simple bill. It ensures that state employees are paid in full and on time, absent an on-time budget. Last year's budget was 100 days late. They were under the threat of being paid federal minimum wage. Fortunately, the controller refused to comply with the governor's order and continue to pay them their full wages. However, they are under that threat should a budget be late. And if you work and put in the time, you should be paid in full and on time, and that's what this bill does. As Senator Hernandez said, there are 381 continuously appropriated items in the state budget, and this should be one of them. There's no reason it shouldn't be. So we ask for your aye vote. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members, Christy Baumer representing the California Professional Firefighters. We're also in support.
Thank you. Anyone else in support?
Madam Chair, members, Paul Curry on behalf of the Correctional Supervisors Organization in support.
Good afternoon. Sherry Golden, representing the Association of California State Supervisors, and we strongly support the bill. Thank you.
Brooks Ellison on behalf of the California attorneys, administrative law judges, and hearing officers in support. And I'd also point out with the state's legal professionals, we don't even get the minimum wage. So with that ruling, we got 0. Thanks.
Neil Johnson, SEIU Local 1000, and on behalf of our 95,000 members, a number of which suffered economic hardships under the furloughs, and some of which the teachers in the institutions who would not get federal minimum wage because of being exempt from that statute, we urge support of this bill.
Thank you. Anyone else in support? Opposition?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, Donna Hershkowitz on behalf of the Judicial Council. I want to be clear first, we're not in opposition to the bill. We just have some concerns. Last year's bill included the employees of the judicial branch, the state employees, as well as the trial court employees in the protections of the bill, and we look forward to working with the author as the bill moves to see if we can get that amendment placed back in the bill again this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in opposition? Do I have any questions from any of the members? Mr. Gaines, please.
I'm just, I guess I question the need of the bill with the passage of Prop 25. It's a simple majority vote to pass a budget. And so I'm just not sure, why is it so critical if you can pass a budget on a simple majority?
Just because it's a simple majority vote doesn't mean the budget will be passed on time, and we're still under the threat of being paid federal minimum wage if it's late. I don't know if the budget will be passed on time this year or not. Hopefully it will be, and we won't be under that threat. However, there's no guarantee that it will be passed on time, and this bill will ensure that public employees be paid in full and on time should there be a late budget, regardless if it's a two-thirds vote or a majority vote. Thank you.
Well, part of the argument for the passage of Prop 25 was a simple majority vote would prevent the crises that have occurred in the past in terms of these delays on getting a budget passed. So, from my vantage point, I'm in opposition because of the fact that I think with Prop 25, you're not going to have the issues that we've had in the past.
Ms. Walters, you had a question?
Yeah, I guess the concern that I have with this bill is that if we don't pass a budget on time, then the vendors in the state of California, the people who do business with us, are severely impacted because they don't get paid right away as it is. And then if we don't pass a budget on time, it makes it even a longer payment process for them. And so I just don't think it's fair to continue to pay the state workers when our vendors aren't being paid when we don't pass a budget on time. So I'm not going to be able to support the bill.
Mr. Hernandez, maybe you have another vehicle where you could do the vendors.
Actually, that concern was brought up last year. The sponsors, as well as I, were willing to look at that, especially providers, for example, Medi-Cal providers that that see patients. And that's something, if you'd wish, we'd be more than happy to talk to you after the committee and look at it at a later date.
Move the bill.
Okay. Bill has been moved. Did you wish to close?
I respectfully ask for your aye vote, Madam Chair and members. Thank you.
Thank you. Please call for the vote.
Negrete McLeod.
Aye.
Negrete McLeod, aye. Walters.
No.
Walters, no. Gaines.
No.
Gaines, no. Padilla.
Aye.
Padilla, aye. Vargas.
Aye.
Padilla, Vargas, aye.
That's the new member, Padilla Vargas.
We're very good friends.
Thank you. The bill is out. Okay. Ms. Hancock? And then we're going to call for the other one. Or is it Vargas Padilla or Padilla Vargas? Good afternoon, Ms. Hancock.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. And members of the committee. SB 259 was introduced to include graduate student research assistants in the language that currently allows teaching assistants, readers, and tutors to choose collective bargaining. The Public Employment Relations Board determined that current statutory language will not allow that, but it really doesn't make sense not to include all graduate student employees in this category because frequently a student in the course of doing their graduate work will be a teaching assistant 1 year and a research assistant the next year, and to lose benefits, lose certain protections every time they make that change is simply inequitable. So we would ask that the language be changed, and I would point out that California State University has already, under voluntary agreement, included their research assistants in this collective bargaining right. So we want to maintain the rights for the existing student employees that have them and expand to include this category of graduate student researchers. With me today are Derek Larimore Hall of UAW 2865 and Aliana Lopez de Victoria, a research assistant at UC Riverside.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Senators. My name is Daraka Larimore Hall, and I'm the president of UAW Local 2865, which is the union for over 12,000 teaching assistants, readers, and tutors at the University of California. I'm also myself a graduate student and sometime teaching assistant at UC Santa Barbara. I want to thank you all for the opportunity to speak to you today in support of Senator Hancock's bill, SB 259. Our union is the sponsor of this bill. So our union, UAW Local 2865, has represented teaching assistants and other student employees at the UC for over 10 years. However, under the current interpretation of the Higher Education Employee-Employer Relations Act, when our members work as research assistants, they do not have the option of choosing collective bargaining or union representation. It's common for graduate students to move back and forth between these titles, often from quarter to quarter or semester to semester. So this means that graduate students will have the rights and protections of a union contract for one term and then poof, lose it the next. Specifically, our collective bargaining agreement includes protections against wrongful termination, harassment and discrimination, as well as clear workload guidelines. There is a clear and fair process for resolving disputes with our supervisors through a grievance procedure, as well as transparency in the hiring process. Under the current situation, graduate students lose these protections whenever they change titles. And they may have the same supervisor in both positions, they may work in the same department, and have the same concerns about their working conditions, but they're unable to utilize the contract's procedures if they switch from a TA position to an RA position. And this makes it very difficult to work out ongoing disputes and issues. In addition to that, as a union, the UAW has prioritized negotiating benefits that make the UC a more family-friendly workplace. Our members, who are often at a point in their lives when they are starting families and have young children, in addition, our members' experiences, as well as many studies, have shown that support for graduate students with children is a key factor for attracting and retaining women in the academy. So for all of these reasons, we've negotiated for and won things like paid family leave, childbearing leave, paid sick days, as well as a child care reimbursement program for preschool children of up to $2,400 per year. All of these family-friendly benefits go away when our members become RAs. With the permission of the chair, I'd like to distribute a letter from a research assistant which outlines the difficulties caused by this inconsistency in coverage. The original here is for the chair, and these are for the committee. She is 8.5 months pregnant at the time, and so unable to testify in person today, but we have those letters. Another point of inconsistency is that research assistants, most of whom work in laboratories,
How long is your report?
What's that?
How long is your presentation?
Another page?
Okay, another page is fine.
Okay, I'll move quickly. Another point is that research assistants work in laboratories, and they're the only group of employees working in UC labs that don't have collective bargaining rights. Passing SB 259 makes sense not only to correct this lack of consistency, it's also a good government bill. This issue of who's covered and who isn't under the law has been a huge subject of litigation over the years. It's cost the UC money, it's cost PERB money, and it costs union members money. So putting this issue to rest will prevent a whole nother round of costly possible litigation. Now, the good news about this bill in today's difficult budget situation is that 85% of research assistants are not funded by the state general fund, but rather by external research grants from federal and private agencies. In addition, the most costly benefits that we have, including health insurance, wage increases, etc., are already extended to research assistants. So the key missing benefits are the rights and protections under the contract, as well as the family-friendly benefits. Now, we estimate that the cost to the state of extending the child care benefit to RAs would only be about $22,000. So in conclusion, in our part, we simply see no point in continuing a situation that affirms people's rights for 10 to 15 weeks and then takes them away when the term is done. This bill is an easy, straightforward way to allow 14,000 people to choose to have consistent and rational set of rights and benefits throughout their time as student employees. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
So good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Aliana Lopez de Victoria. I am a fourth year PhD candidate in the bioengineering department at UC Riverside. I hope to complete my doctorate degree in 1 more year and then to work as a bioengineering in the biotechnology industry. I have worked as a teaching assistant and a research assistant in my department, where I'm currently working as a research assistant. My area of specialization is the understanding of interaction between molecules in order to develop drugs to cure immune diseases that are caused when our immune system is not working properly. For example, macular degeneration, which is the leading cause of blindness in the elderly. At the University of California, teaching assistants are represented by the union, the UAW Local 2865. Under the union contract, teaching assistants have many rights and protections. Some of these include the right not to be expected to work more than what we are paid for, protection against health and safety hazards and dangers, protections against discrimination, protection against unjust discipline and dismissal, the right to job security, and a first grievance procedure to enforce these and all other rights and protections. When I started working as a teaching assistant, better known as a TA, in the winter quarter of 2008, I was excited to have a union job with all the rights, benefits, and protections of the union contract. I was especially excited because the union had just won in the previous full term the right for TAs to take paid sick days and take paid family leave. It was really important to me as a single mother of an 8-year-old girl. I sometimes need to take time off of work when my daughter is sick, when she's off of school, or when the childcare just doesn't work. Teaching assistants and research assistants are not eligible for the Family Medical Leave Act leaves because we typically work only half time while we are studying. As a result, we never accumulate enough hours in any year to qualify for this leave. That's why the paid sick days and the paid family leave rights in the union contract for the TAs are important. They give graduate students with families like me a way to do our jobs while taking care of our families and obtaining a good quality education that will help me, my family, and our community. At the end of my teaching assistantship, I was offered an opportunity to work as a research assistantship in my department, the bioengineering department. This offer was a great opportunity for me because it gave me a chance to contribute to the UC world-renowned research mission. Working in this lab has enabled me to contribute to science by writing grants, winning research grants, writing papers about my research, and mentoring undergraduates that want to be engineers. But despite all that I contribute to the UC research missions, to my field, to science in general, and to society, by helping finding cures to diseases, by working as a research assistant, I do not have the same rights and protections I did when I was a teaching assistant. And especially, I do not have the right to paid sick leaves and paid family leave. That means that I have to constantly choose between being a good mom or being a good engineer. And that's not a fair choice for me or for any woman in academia. Many of my graduate student colleagues who are parents also use the union negotiated child care benefits as TA, but then when they work as an RA, those benefits disappear. This adds stress to our lives and jeopardizes our access to a quality education. Madam Chair and members of the committee, thank you again for the opportunity to testify before you. I urge you to vote for SB 259 to give me and my fellow RAs the right to choose to form a union and bargain for rights and protection like those we enjoy when we are working as TAs in the UC.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in support?
Kelly Green on behalf of the California Nurses Association in support.
Thank you.
Sherry Golden on behalf of the California State University's unions employees, we support the bill. Thank you.
Lakeisha Harrison, president of AFSCME Local 3299. We represent 20,000 workers at the University of California, and we support.
Be careful with that sharp corner. I see. Yeah. I know. I cut my head.
Rodney Orr, University Professional and Technical Employees, CWA Local 9119, representing the Staff Research Associates who work directly with the RAs in strong support.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in support? Is there anyone in opposition? Questions from the members? Yes, Mr. Gates.
I know we don't get a fiscal analysis on these bills that are presented to us in at least at this level of committee. But we've got a fiscal crisis on our hands of $26 billion that we're trying to resolve, and I just don't know where we're going to find the money with your proposed legislation. I don't know how we can afford this at this stage, given the budget crisis that we're suffering. And if you have any explanation.
I would simply urge the committee to consider this as a policy issue right now. The estimate was $22,000 for the child care, extending the child care subsidy to research assistants, seeing as how teaching assistants already have that. As was pointed out, 85% of teaching and research assistance subsidies do come from private grant sources in the federal government. And really, the question I see before us is it's almost cleanup language to extend to all graduate student employees at the University of California the same rights that most of them have now and that everyone has at CSU.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else?
I strongly support this measure. Thank you very much for bringing it, and I'm proud to be a co-author and would move the motion.
Okay. All right, so my understanding is that today you could be a teaching assistant and you have rights. Tomorrow you go over to being a research assistant and you don't. Then you can jump back and you do it, and you jump back and forth. Okay. All right, the bill has been moved. Seeing no other questions, call for the vote, please.
Negrete McLeod?
Aye.
Negrete McLeod, aye. Walters?
No.
Walters, no. Gaines?
No.
Gaines, no. Padilla?
Aye.
Padilla, aye. Vargas?
Aye.
Vargas, aye.
Okay, we have, thank you, that bill is out. We have one bill that was heard earlier, if we could call. That bill is 318, Mr. De Leon. If we could call the roll. We're going to call the roll on 318, De Leon, Civil Service.
Walters?
Hold on one second.
Okay.
Aye.
Walters, aye. Gaines?
Aye.
Gaines, aye.
That's 5-0. That bill is out. Yeah, we have one bill on consent, item 7 of the agenda, SB 322, retirement. That's the committee bill.
Negrete McLeod?
Aye.
Negrete McLeod, aye. Walters?
Aye.
Walters, aye. Gaines?
Aye.
Gaines, aye. Padilla?
Aye.
Padilla, aye. Vargas?
Aye.
Vargas, aye.
There are 2 bills left on the agenda.
These are
Yeah, these are mine.
the one underneath is the one you did.
Oh, sorry, you did. Okay. So I have 2. Give her the Madam Chair. I'm going to
You want to start with SB 350?
Yes, okay, thank you very much. Benefits in CalPERS. The benefit applies to local agency CalPERS members who die prior to retirement. These public employees do not have Social Security, and this benefit is meant to take place of Social Security benefits for their survivors. Current law requires employees to contribute to these benefits even when they are fully funded and there is no cost to employers. Because these benefits are rarely used, the lowest 3 levels of the benefits have very large funding pools that have accumulated over the years because of the continuous flow of employee money. Combining the 2 lowest levels of the 1959 survivor benefit into level 3 will provide modest increases to survivors currently in level 1 and 2 and further protects employers in level 3 from having to make employer contributions. This bill also ensures that employee contributions to level 3 will kick in at any time the funding drops below 200%. This ensures that the program will continue to be fully funded by employee contributions. I have with me Danny Brown from CalPERS to explain more about the 1959 Survivor Plan and answer your questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. Danny Brown on behalf of CalPERS, the sponsors of the bill. CalPERS believes that this approach is the most reasonable and fairest way to deal with these excess funds that have built up in these closed pools. A couple of things I just want to point out to make sure everybody's aware of is first is we're not eliminating the employee contribution, we're just suspending it as long as it's at least 200% funded. The other thing is that these employee contributions, on some occasions, the employer is actually making them on behalf of the employee. And so in those cases, it's the employer who actually would be benefiting from these suspended employee contributions. With that, I'll answer any other questions you may have and ask for your support.
Madam Chair, members, Paul Smith with the Regional Council of Rural Counties, representing boards of supervisors of 30 rural counties. We have about 8 or so rural counties that are in one of the 3-level benefits. I'll just say we would love to support this bill, and we have been working, I guess, almost 14 months now, this bill and the previous bill. Our main concern is to make sure that if this measure happens, the pool assets are managed, the employees get a higher benefit. We want to make sure, since the surpluses are so high, that the employer never has an obligation to fund this. Particularly if we are giving benefits, higher benefits in the future, which we expect. We have been working with CalPERS to make sure we come up with language that does that. The reason why we don't want any exposure, obviously, is we're paying a higher benefit, and we're comfortable with that. But remember, employers under law cannot enjoy the benefits of the surplus. Only the employees can, which is fair and right and just. But if we're going to go ahead and move and go ahead and spend down the surplus, if you will, to the benefit of the employees, in the future, we just do not feel we should have an obligation to this pool any longer as employers. Again, trying to work with CalPERS to craft that language to make sure it's tight and as best as we can. Obviously, last year we couldn't reach an agreement, but if we could, we would be in strong support of the bill.
So I take it you're not in support of the bill?
We're not. We would like to have a support if amended position.
Okay. Other witnesses in support?
Madam Chair, I'd like him to explain.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
I just want to mention that last year we did take the amendment. Was one of the amendments we took last year was to have the employee contribution kick back in if we get to 200% funded. The way the bill was originally written, the employee contribution wouldn't have kicked in until we got back down to 100% funded. So we did take that amendment last year to try to address some of the rural counties' concerns. I mean, we will try to work with them, but I don't think there's any possible way that we can ensure that the employers could never pay again. I mean, I think that would just, again, I don't think that there's a way to do that, and I don't think it would be that we would be doing a service to everybody if we tried to say that we could. So I think that we will work with them to try to alleviate that concern as much as possible, and to make sure. I think that we are most of these employers are already in the third pool, so they are benefiting from the assets being moved from the first and second levels, where there's a smaller number of employers, to the third level. So the third level employers are actually benefiting from this, and they are already getting. They're not going to pay sooner. I mean, we're kind of giving them the benefit of these surplus assets. I agree with him. There are some employers in the first and second level who now have taken on more risk, but the majority of these employers in the third level are actually benefiting from these excess funds.
Okay. Any other witnesses in support? Witnesses in opposition? Questions of the committee?
I'll move the motion.
Okay. The bill's been moved. Go ahead and call the roll.
Negrete McLeod?
Aye.
Negrete McLeod, aye. Walters?
No.
Walters, no. Gaines?
No.
Gaines, no. Padilla?
Aye.
Padilla, aye. Vargas?
Aye.
Vargas, aye.
That bill's out 3-2. Okay.
My next bill is SB 439. Madam Chair and members, SB 439 is sponsored by the State Controller. It will reduce the gift limit under the Public Records Act that a CalPERS or CalSTRS board member or high-level employee may receive from any entity that contracts with CalPERS or CalSTRS. Recent reports have highlighted improper past practices by former CalPERS board members and staff, including the giving and receiving of elaborate gifts of meals and travel by entities either doing business with or seeking to do business with CalPERS. The current gift limit is $420. SB 439 will reduce that amount to $50 annually. Any contracting entity that is found to have violated the limit more than 2 times in a consecutive 5-year period shall be disqualified from bidding on, being awarded, any contract for a period of 2 years. Members, you have before you author's amendments to the bill that add technical and clarifying language. These amendments have been included in the committee analysis. Today with me I have David O'Toole from the State Controller's Office to speak about the bill and answer any question you may have.
Thank you, Chair and members. Dave O'Toole, representing the Controller. This proposal stems from the placement agent scandal that broke in 2009 and it was followed by the independent review by Steptoe & Johnson that came out last fall. It's been discussed this month that documented the influence peddling and recommended reforms to the such as a gift limit as one of the key reforms to protect the state's investment. And the provisions of the bill have been explained. I would also want to mention that all political reform regulations will be in effect, and that in conclusion, we believe that the measure, along with the another reform bill, AB 873, dealing with a revolving door, those two, which are both in the Steptoe & Johnson report, will restore the credibility to the state's retirement systems and enable the men and women who invest taxpayer and employee dollars to do their jobs without the persistent cloud of suspicion. And thank you for your consideration of this measure, and I respectfully request your support.
Any other witnesses in support?
Danny Brown on behalf of CalPERS in support of the bill.
Berman Obaldia, representing CalSTRS, Madam Chair and members. This particular bill is up for review in the CalSTRS Legislative Committee this coming Thursday. It builds upon some of the actions that the CalSTRS Board has adopted in previous years. The staff recommendation is to support. So. They don't.
Neil Johnson, SEIU Local 1000. We represent, as the exclusive rep, many of the PERS and STRS staff people, and we are in whole support of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Any witnesses in opposition? Questions of the committee? Motion? Come on, Wolf. Bill's been moved. Oh, I'm sorry, as amended.
That's what I meant.
Negrete McLeod? Aye. Negrete McLeod, aye. Walters?
Aye.
Walters, aye. Gaines?
Aye.
Gaines, aye. Padilla?
Aye.
Padilla, aye. Vargas?
Aye.
Vargas, aye.
The bill's out. It's on a 5-0 vote, as amended. Yes, we'll take it back. Lori, I wanted to end on a good note with you.
Thank you. That concludes the committee hearing. But before we leave, I want to restate that I meant no disrespect. My attempt at humor fell flat. But I have to say that anybody that's looking for a job, either laterally or moving up, has to have training. So for somebody to want to hire somebody that doesn't have training and they need somebody on Mr. Simitian's bill doesn't make any sense to me. Okay. Thank you very much, members.
You know, Gloria, they're going to have a YouTube on you now. Yeah.